And once again, I am black with you. And we say greetings to each and every one of you. Akwaba and welcome. Welcome to another round of the Conscious Rasta Report. Weekday mornings, you and I get together live here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, and livinginblack.com. And we deal with culture, consciousness, historical perspectives, entertainment, economics, education, health, labor, law, politics, religion, family, conflict, future studies, all areas of human interactivity and development. Today's date is Tuesday, the 6th of January, 2025 in the Gregorian, the Western calendar. This corresponds to the year 6266. And I should say 2026 in the Western calendar. It corresponds to 6266 in the Kemetic calendar, to which would realign our cultural clock. Welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, here on livinginblack.com. You may have heard the news this morning that the United States Health and Human Services Department has, per the recommendations of Robert F. Kennedy, the Secretary of DHHS, to reschedule U.S. vaccines, or the vaccine schedule for U.S. children, to be more in line with European vaccine schedules. We're going to go deep into this topic for today. And hopefully you will hold me to standards of truth, absolute truth. Because to be perfectly honest, whenever you and I are researching or encouraged to talk about vaccines, it only comes from the perspective that they are proven safe, and they are not. That they are proven effective, they are not, and are expected to talk about vaccines only cause positive outcomes long term in that child's life. And that is not true. So we're going to go deep into the topic for today. I invite you, my listening audience, to join me for this conversation and put on your skeptical cap. I have no problem with anyone who listens to this show, my show here on LIB Radio. I have no problem whatsoever with you being skeptical about what it is that we plan to talk about. So we're going into this topic today to vaccinate or not. You've got to know. You've got to know the best facts that can be known, and you must know them truthfully. You've got to have a source that you can trust on this. First of all, I want to say greetings to my beloved sister for Africa One is in the house. She says, Hotep, Brother Katie, and global LIB family. I think I did send you via WhatsApp the promo for today. We're going to do the best we can only to give you truth today. And truth is coming from my book, which most of you, I hope, have heard of. My book called Epidemic, The Rise of New Childhood Diseases in the United States, a Man-Made Disaster. Epidemic. I encourage all of you to go to my catalog at kitty.biz, or you can go to Amazon and get that book. If you're outside the United States, do get the book from Amazon. I have a lot of research on the table for today, including I have a video queued up. I want to share this video. This video talks about the subject of what is acute flaccid myelitis. I want you to write that down. Acute, A-C-C-U-T-E, flaccid, F-L-A-C-C-I-D, myelitis. We're going to share that video. And this video is not necessarily coming from the perspective of someone who is not trusting of the federal government. This is a vaccine supporter, but she's going to leak a few key points, a few key statements in this conversation that's going to open the door that we researchers are going to step through, and hopefully we will give you a better truth. I'll put this on the table and let's see what this woman has to say.
There's been a lot of discussion lately about a disorder that's called acute flaccid myelitis. We call it AFM just as an abbreviation because the words are otherwise pretty long. Fortunately, this is a very rare disorder. It's only occurred in about 1 in 1 million children and adults over the last couple years. Overall, there's only been 300 or 400 cases in the United States, again, over the last 5 years. It's a disorder that affects the spinal cord and can cause weakness of the arms and legs. The weakness can be pretty profound, so some of the kids that we've seen have had difficulty walking or difficulty feeding themselves. It has been, average age has been about 4 years. We can pretty clearly come up with a diagnosis when we do an MRI scan or a spinal tap. There are some treatments that we can consider giving early on in the case, and so it's definitely best to come see us. For prevention, we know that a lot of these disorders have been happening in the fall because we know that can prevent so many preventable diseases that it's really essential. Again, this is a rare disorder that we don't see very often. However, if you see these symptoms in your child, definitely.
All right, and I did have my microphone open. If anybody had a hard time hearing that, you let me know. I can play it again. In fact, maybe that's someone letting me know that they weren't able to hear it, but you let me know and I can play it again. Acute flaccid myelitis. Acute flaccid myelitis. Acute, quick acting, short, moderate disease. Acute is such as a flu. Flu is acute disorder or disease. Flaccid meaning limp. And myelitis is a disorder of nervous system. In this case, the spinal nervous system, where the myelin sheath becomes disturbed, distracted, or injured by whatever process. The thing is, well, let me go into my research and I'm going to show you what is acute flaccid myelitis. I did put up this link for those of you in our listening audience for you to get access to. I'm going to copy this link one more time and paste it up for, okay, it is on the YouTube page. National Increase in Acute Flaccid Myelitis, AFM. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, has noted an increase in reported and confirmed acute flaccid myelitis cases in 2018. 2018, that's going back 7 years. That YouTube video that you just saw was inaccurate. They're talking about an increase in reported and confirmed acute flaccid myelitis cases in 2018. AFM is a rare but serious condition that affects the nervous system, causing a sudden onset of arm and or leg weakness. Acute flaccid myelitis has a number of causes, including viruses, what they call viruses, such as enterovirus and West Nile virus, for which there is no vaccination for either one, and the condition where the body's immune system attacks and destroys body tissue that it mistakes for foreign material. While we know that these can cause acute flaccid myelitis, the cause for most cases is unknown. The first increase in AFM cases occurred in 2014. And since then, the Arizona Department of Health Services has teamed up with the CDC to try to understand what causes this illness, who is at higher risk, and what the long-term effects might be. To date, in 2018, 2 AFM cases have been confirmed in Arizona. Now, I don't have the date of this article. I don't have that handy. But in Arizona, in 2014, 2 cases. They're talking about 300 to 400 cases increasing annually. Well, there are 50 states. So if Arizona, a sparsely populated state, has 2 cases, then quite likely it could be more, many more, 100 times more cases around the country for that year. The first increase, okay, acute. Let's look now at this acute flaccid myelitis. It is a rare but serious neurologic condition in which the gray matter of the spinal cord becomes inflamed. That's the acute, causing sudden onset of flaccid, limp weakness or paralysis, usually in children. It often begins with a mild viral illness. Mild viral illness is what a vaccine causes. A mild viral illness is the result of a vaccine intended to convey the immune response, which would give lifelong protection from that. Supposed to. It often begins with a mild viral illness, fever, cough, respiratory symptoms, and then progresses over hours to days to weakness in one or more limbs, sometimes affecting facial muscles or breathing. What AFM is. Now, I want you to consider this. As you hear me talking acute flaccid myelitis, I claim is the new name for polio. That's what I'm claiming. I want you to listen and hear if you hear polio being reflected in this. Acute flaccid myelitis affects the motor nerve cells, anterior horn cells, in the spinal cord, leading to loss of muscle strength and reflexes rather than sensory loss. Symptoms typically include sudden limb weakness, decreased or absent reflexes, and in some cases, difficulty swallowing, speaking, eye movement, or breathing if cranial nerves or respiratory muscles are involved. Therefore, if we're talking about cranial nerves, muscle, and respiratory muscles as inclusive of the spinal cord system, then we're talking about whatever it was not a local injury. It was a systemic injury that took place. Point 2, symptoms. Oh, I read that. Point 3, the illness is rare, but can cause long-term disability. Many children improve somewhat over time, but persistent weakness and paralysis are common. Causes and viruses involved. Acute flaccid myelitis appears to be triggered most often by certain non-polio enteroviruses, especially enterovirus D68 and enterovirus A71. Now, I don't know how many of these so-called enteroviruses there are, but I do know that enteroviruses are involved in these mRNAs. Enteroviruses are, let me just give you a confirmation of that. That's a provocative statement. And I'm going to copy the word enterovirus. I'm going to go over here to my preferred search engine. And this preferred search engine is Perplexity. It's my favorite. Are enteroviruses viruses used in the manufacture of mRNA injections. I didn't call them vaccines, I called them injections. And that's going to give me an answer Enteroviruses themselves are not used as ingredients or production hosts in authorized mRNA vaccine manufacturing, including the COVID-19 mRNA and other licensed mRNA products to date. The only connection between enteroviruses and mRNA technology is that researchers are developing experimental mRNAs targeting enteroviruses. So again, the vaccine is intended to cause a mild infection. So they are experimenting, which means if it's ethical, it's not been introduced into human beings. And there is one class. Let me ask this: what class of viruses are, capital ARE, used in mRNA development? I'm going to ask that second question. Identifying classes of viruses used in mRNA vaccine development processes. And this is coming up. It's coming up rather slowly. And for the authorized nucleoside modified mRNA vaccines in current use, no virus class is used as vector or backbone. The platform is a non-viral synthetic mRNA encapsulated in lipid nanoparticles. A separate experimental branch of the field uses self-amplifying mRNA built from alpha virus replicon systems, which do derive from the alpha virus family, but these are a distinct technology that is not used in standard mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. So I didn't get the answer that I thought I would get. And I do believe that the enterovirus connection is one that I'm not prepared to dismiss. I'm a little hard-headed, and I thought I had already uncovered this evidence in the peer review research that I've had, but I'd have to go deep to get that answer that I was looking for. But I've got plenty of information today. Going back to my research, we're talking about the causes and viruses involved in what is it called? Acute flaccid myelitis. Clusters of acute flaccid myelitis cases have occurred in association with seasonal outbreaks of these enteroviruses, particularly in children, often in late summer and fall. What happens from late summer and fall? The beginning of the vaccine schedule for the following school year. Relationship to polio. Clinically and on imaging, AFM looks very similar to poliomyelitis. Both primarily attack anterior horn cells in the spinal cord, producing acute asymmetric flaccid paralysis that can result in permanent weakness. Because of these similarities, AFM is often called a, quote, polio-like illness, unquote. A polio-like illness. And the term AFM was adopted to describe poliomyelitis type spinal cord lesions and flaccid limb weakness where no poliovirus is found. Now, no poliovirus is found because they're not looking for poliovirus. No poliovirus is found because that would throw off the whole idea of giving live poliovirus vaccine. And there is no real test for a virus. There are only tests to see if antibodies or antigens to antibodies against a virus are to be found. It's a crazy thing. I wrote a book called Panic, and Panic deals with the COVID pandemic, tells us about the state of the world. And in that book, Panic, I gave you a chapter called a brief tutorial on vaccines, on viruses, brief tutorial on viruses. At the end of that chapter, I loudly proclaim that 126 years at the time, it might have been 124 years, of virology should be discarded as junk science. I gave you plenty of reasons why I made that conclusory statement, such as there is no distinction between an exosome and a virus. They appear to be exactly the same, just as this document I just reading from said there is no real distinction between acute flaccid myelitis and polio. Because of the similarities, AFM is often called a polio-like virus illness, and the term AFM was adopted to describe poliomyelitis type spinal cord lesions and flaccid limb weakness when no polio virus is found. How AFM differs from polio? AFM is not caused by polio virus. Modern AFM cases are instead linked mainly to non-polio enteroviruses such as EVD68 and EVA71, while classical polio is caused by polio virus types 1 through 3. Polio, how does it differ? Polio is a vaccine preventable with a polio vaccine, so they say. But this vaccine does not prevent AFM caused by the other enteroviruses. They're calling the polio causing poliomyelitis type virus. Are they calling it an enterovirus? This says the other enteroviruses, which is why AFM can occur even in fully polio immunized children. In fact, that's where AFM is caused, in polio immunized children. I know it's a little confusing today, but there is method to the madness. I do welcome more conversation. For Africa One says, yes, play it again. Okay, I'm going to play that again right after I finish talking here. Take my microphone out. Nguvu says, Salvador, sorry, I can only listen today. Talk about contact vaccinations if possible. I get the A flu because I came in contact with you, which is why that is better than a vaccination. I don't know what A flu stands for. He said, For Africa One says, could the information you thought you'd find have been scrubbed? Just wondering. It is scrubbed. The information that I've heard about is scrubbed, but I do know that if I dig deep enough, I can find it unscrubbed. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go back. I'm going to put this up one more time. I think I have it up here. No, that's not it. Put this in I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to play the video one more time. We're talking about acute flaccid myelitis. And let me share this with you. Go home. What is acute flaccid myelitis? This time I'm going to mute my microphone so you're not getting a double hiccup, or you're hearing it double from my screen. Then get this started. 1 second and go over here. I'm going to share screen. What is acute flaccid myelitis? And this one's going to be full screen. And lastly, I'm going to mute my microphone and share it with all of you. I'll be right back.
There's been a lot of discussion lately about a disorder that's called acute flaccid myelitis. We call it AFM just as an abbreviation because the words are otherwise pretty long. Fortunately, this is a very rare disorder. It's only occurred in about 1 in 1 million children, and adults over the last couple years. Overall, there's only been 300 or 400 cases in the United States, again, over the last 5 years. It's a disorder that affects the spinal cord and can cause weakness of the arms and legs. The weakness can be pretty profound, so some of the kids that we've seen have had difficulty walking or difficulty feeding themselves. It has been predominantly a disorder of kids under 18, and the average age has been about 4 years. We can pretty clearly come up with a diagnosis when we do an MRI scan or a spinal tap. There are some treatments that we can consider giving early on in the case, and so it's definitely best to come see us. For prevention, we know that a lot of these disorders have been happening in the fall or in the winter when infections are more common, so using common sense like hand washing can be helpful, and then making sure that your child is up to date on their immunizations, because we know that can prevent so many preventable diseases that it's really essential. Again, this is a really rare disorder that we don't see very often. However, if you see these symptoms in your child, definitely bring them to the attention of your pediatrician.
All right, I am back now, and you did get a chance to hear it without the echoing sound. And I'm going to just finish this part. I did read through this, and it says key clinical and public health points. Acute flaccid myelitis is considered a medical emergency because weakness can rapidly progress and involve the diaphragm, requiring respiratory support. Management is largely supportive and rehabilitative. No specific antiviral or immune therapy has consistently proven effective. So early recognition, monitoring of breathing, and intensive rehabilitation are central to care. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of the document, and now we're going to focus on specifically why vaccines are dangerous. Again, our subject for today, to vaccinate or not, you have got to know. Because you as a parent, obviously, you've got to protect your child. You don't want to make serious mistakes in your child's early life that are going to last for the child's entire life. Let me just first greet all of you in the YouTube. I see you in the house, Eddie McCroy, Grand Rising. Will this weather also cause aches and pains? Well, this weather does lower your immune response if your body is not highly tuned up, highly tuned for your immune system to take on all comers. But if your body's highly tuned, you're better off allowing your body to adjust to the colder weather. That's part of your sirtuin response. It's in your DNA. And believe it or not, the more that you can adjust to the colder weather. Now, you don't want to be in your house sitting on ice cubes and freezing. But right now, I am in the house, and the house is probably around 65, 64 degrees. And I have, as part of my longevity program, I allow my body to adjust to the cool weather in the wintertime and to the warmer weather, to the hot weather in Las Vegas in the summertime. I'm the last one to turn the heater on and the last one to turn the air conditioner on. But that's part of my very specific longevity program. And there is definitely merit in that. I'm going to cover that here someday soon. But what it is I'm protective of this paradigm that I have. It includes 34 lifestyle components that is resulted in my projections of longevity I am projected to live to be a minimum of 120 to 124 years of age with unassisted viability to age 118. So Sandra Muhammad is in the house. I think it's because of immune system being weakened due to the vax. And that is fundamental to what I am talking about today, beloved. You hit it right on the head. Thank you for being in this family. Flying Guillotine, I see you in the house. Keedy, he says, Grand Risings or GM. I think it means Grand Risings. But good morning, he means. That's right. Grand Risings. Good morning. So welcome, welcome, welcome to our YouTube family. Great to have you in the house. Please, if you can, everyone in the YouTube, we ask you hit the like button to the best of our abilities. The YouTube is actually building back up, but it still has less than 10% or only has 10% of what it was before I was banned on YouTube. So no, it's less than 10%. I only have 217 subscribers now, whereas before I had well over 5,000 subscribers before YouTube cut me out and deleted my all my videos that were there. There were thousands of videos. I gave them the best I could, and they threw it back in my face and said, "We don't want it." I say, well, you go your way and I'll go ours. So I ask this of perplexity. I ask it to make a complete list of all substances used for vaccine manufacturing, including all adjuvants, antibiotics, stabilizers, heavy metals, and all included substances that have been called into question by researchers such as Neil Z. Miller, Randall Neustaedter, and Robert Mendelsohn. Also include all genetic materials from animals and human embryos. That was the inquiry. It came back with the following: a single, complete list, quote unquote, of every substance ever used in all vaccines does not exist publicly because ingredients vary by product, manufacturer, year, and country. And new platforms like the mRNA add and remove components over time. What can be done is to group and list the major categories and the specific substances that appear across licensed human vaccines and that have been discussed by critics such as Neil Z. Miller, Randall Neustaedter, and Robert Mendelsohn. Below is a broad ingredient level map. Any truly exhaustive list must be built from individual product package inserts and official excipient tables from the CDC, FDA, EMA, and World Health Organization. So, category, adjuvants, immune boosters. Common aluminum and other adjuvants used in licensed vaccines, often highlighted in critical literature, include aluminum hydroxide, or aluminium if you're in the UK. That's the pronunciation. But aluminium has more syllables. Aluminum hydroxide, aluminum phosphate, aluminum potassium sulfate, aluminum sulfate, MF59, a squalene-based oil in water emulsion, which includes squalene, polysorbate 80, sorbitan, and trioleate, I think it is, ASO3, CPG, and this is synthetic DNA motifs, and monophospholipid A, MPL, and related detoxified endotoxin derivatives, and also cholera toxin, E. coli heat labile toxin derivatives in some experimental or mucosal vaccines. Cholera toxin E. That's incredible. Under the category of preservatives, stabilizers, and surfactants, these are substances. That don't get across a black lip very easy. To prevent contamination, maintain potency, and to keep components in solution. Several are frequently questioned. These preservatives include preservatives and antimicrobial compounds include thimerosal, which is ethyl mercury containing preservative, still in some multi-dose influenza vials. So you are getting the mercury containing preservative if you're taking the flu shot. Phenol, 2-phenyloxyethanol, benzalthonium chloride in some toxoid products historically. Formaldehyde. Formaldehyde also used as an inactivating agent, meaning it's used to kill the live component that's used in the batch manufacturing of vaccines. When you manufacture vaccines for mass injection, you have to do, there are three components in the vaccine. One, the pathogen. Two, the carrier agent. And four, the deactivating agents. So they're talking about formaldehyde as an inactivating or deactivating agent. Also, glutaldehyde, also an inactivating and disinfectant agent. Beta propiolactone, viral inactivation, residuals may remain. And EDTA, ethylene ethylene dimetetracetic acid, sometimes included as a stabilizing chelator, meaning to remove heavy metals as a stabilizing this. Now, you have to understand these are all used to deactivate the component, the first component of the three components. The deactivating agent must be there, otherwise they would be putting the live growing compound from this putrid mix, they'll be putting that right in your veins. Under the category of stabilizers, including sugars, protein, amino acids, and polyols. Stabilizers include sucrose, lactose, sorbitol, mannitol, says much less common but used in some lyophilized products. Gelatin, hydrolyzed gelatin, often from porcine, sometimes bovine. Porcine means pig. Bovine means the gelatin made from cow bones. Human serum albumin, or recombinant human albumin, derived from yeast. Bovine serum albumin, bovine serum components. Amino acids, example given glycine, glutamic acid, and sometimes listed generically. And monosodium L-glutamate, MSG, and lactalbumin hydrosate, that appears to be made from milk products. Lactalbumin hydrolysate. And albumin is a protein found in the blood. Comment from 4 Africa 1. I see you in the house. She said, when you mentioned breathing difficulties, I had an image of iron lungs of the past. You are absolutely correct. I almost brought that into the conversation, but you're absolutely correct. Those iron lungs of the past was the effect of polio. And now, of course, they don't need the iron lung. They have smaller devices, but it's definitely problematic. Definitely problematic. Under the category of what's in a vaccine still, surfactants and emulsifiers include polysorbate 80, also known as tween 80, polysorbate 20, Triton X100 or similar detergents, non-ionic surfactants used in splitting viruses, polyethylene glycol, and PEG conjugated lipids, especially in mRNA vaccines. Hexadexyl methyl aluminium bromide, HTAB. That's cationic detergent, mainly in older experimental formulations. Others, antibiotics and other residual process chemicals used to prevent bacterial contamination during cell culture, typically present in trace amounts in the final products. These include neomycin, polymyxin B, streptomycin, gentamicin, kanamycin in some cell culture systems, and amphotericin, antifungal in some culture mediums. That's amphotericin B. Next, other chemicals, sometimes present as residuals or buffers, include, and excuse me why it's difficult pronouncing these, let me wet my tongue to get these big, long chemical terms to come out of my mouth. Other chemicals, sometimes present as residuals or buffers, include beta propiolactone, already listed an inactivation agent, acetone, used in inactivation purification, trace residuals are possible, formaldehyde, formalin, inactivation and residual, glutaraldehyde, already listed both inactivation and disinfectant, mineral salts, sodium chloride, potassium chloride, calcium and magnesium salts, phosphate buffers, and sodium borate, also known as borax, as a stabilizer in some products. Example given, Vacta, VAQTA, and sodium hydroxide, hydrochloric acid. Sodium hydroxide is hydrochloric acid. pH adjustment, not typical deliberate ingredients, even though noted by critics. There's more. Heavy metals and metal-related compounds. Ingredients in this category are central in the critiques by Neil Z. Miller and others. Include aluminum salts, hydroxide, phosphate, potassium aluminum sulfate, and aluminum potassium sulfate. Thimerosal, including ethyl mercury compound, contains mercury, and residual stainless steel related metals or trace metals from manufacturing equipment, not typically specified but sometimes discussed theoretically in safety reviews. Next category, buffers, salts, and other excipients. Frequently present, but not always controversial, they still appear in ingredient lists and in some activist literature, including sodium chloride, potassium chloride, sodium phosphate, mono and dibasic, potassium phosphate, monobasic and dibasic, sodium bicarbonate, trometamol, tromethamine. It's a tris buffer. Medium 199 and similar complex media formulations, mixtures of amino acids, vitamins, and salts. Dextrose, also known as glucose. And lastly, soy peptone, yeast extract, and other nutrient broths. And I see a comment for Africa One says, these ingredients sound like a chemical warfare cocktail. Yeah, and here's the thing. This is true. That if you and I put these ingredients in a bowl and fed them to our children, it would be better for them to eat it, because at least their stomach acid would begin to neutralize some of it, change the chemical compounds, and they might better survive it and not be so injured. But in this case, they're putting it in a hypodermic needle and injecting it directly into the bodies of our children at as early as birth in a baby. If you were caught by the police using these substances as they stand, you would be arrested, that child taken away. It is a chemical warfare cocktail, and it is chemical warfare against the entirety of the U.S. population. I know the UK is very close to what the United States is, but it's distinct as well. It's chemical warfare against the whole planet. And I didn't even get into these different vaccines that are used around the world, where the human chorionic gonadotropin has been found in the vaccine. The HPV vaccine, which is now suspected of causing cancer in the women who've received it early, much earlier in life. You can get an HPV vaccine at 12 years old and develop cervical cancer at age 30. And that girls and women are being targeted around the world for these vaccines. They have another vaccine that's being developed for male sterilization. We must take responsibility for defending the childbearing age women of our nation against these beasts. I continue. What is in a vaccine? Genetic and biological source materials. These include viral or bacterial antigens themselves, plus residual host DNA, proteins, and other biologicals from animals or humans that are a major focus of Mendelssohn-style critiques. Animal-derived cells and genetic material. Chicken embryo fibroblasts. These from chicken embryo cell culture. Example given: measles, mumps, rubella, and some influenza vaccines. Chickens in them. I don't eat chickens, so I don't take the flu vaccines. Egg chicken proteins and ovalbumin. It sounds like ova, which is an egg, bumin, and albumin, which is protein from that egg. It says from hens' eggs used for many influenza and some older vaccines. Vero cells, African green monkey kidney cells. Example given: inactivated polio and some rabies and others. Bovine serum and fetal bovine serum. In culture medium, residual bovine DNA and proteins are possible. And gelatin, often porcine, sometimes bovine, as a stabilizer, carrying collagen-derived peptides and DNA fragments from pork and from beef. They are injecting it into our babies. And then lastly, human-derived cells and genetic material. Point: MRC-5 human diploid fibroblast cells, originally derived from a fetal lung in the 1960s, used for varicella, that's a chickenpox vaccine, some hepatitis A, etc., with residual human DNA and cell proteins. Point: WI-38 human diploid fibroblast cells, another fetal cell strain used historically in rubella and some other vaccines. And these are aborted fetuses that are used. That's true. Other named human fetal cell lines include PERC C6, HEK-293, in some research and in a few licensed products or manufacturing steps. including vector or adeno-based platforms. And I did say adenovirus as a vector, but what I meant to say, and I'm going to copy this verbatim, vector or adeno-based platforms. I'm going to go back into my search engine and I ask, are enteroviruses used? But now I'm going to change the question to are vector or adeno-based platforms, are a vector or adeno-based platforms, I copied it twice, used to manufacture vaccines of any sorts, just vaccines. Are vector or adeno-based platforms used to manufacture vaccines? Yes. Viral vector and adenovirus-based platforms are actively used to manufacture several licensed and experimental vaccines. Now, earlier I asked if the adenoviruses, I said enteroviruses. That's the difference. Adenovirus. I'm correcting myself. It says, what vector and adeno-based mean? Vector viral vaccines are modified replication deficient virus as a delivery vehicle to carry a gene encoding an antigen into human cells. Common vectors include adenovirus, adeno-associated virus, lentivirus, and pox viruses. Ooh, that sounds kind of nasty, especially now that they're talking about monkey pox invading Africa. Let me put this on my website. I'm going to copy this and then finish reading it. What vector and adeno-based mean? Viral vector vaccines use a modified replication deficient virus as a delivery vehicle to carry a gene or encoding an antigen into human cells. Common virus vectors include, wait, don't do that. Do this instead. Adenovirus, adeno-associated virus, lentivirus, and pox viruses. And going through, it says, I'm highlighting this and putting bullet points on it, but maybe I'll come back to it later. Adenovirus-based vaccines are a major subgroup of viral sector vaccines, where engineered human or chimpanzee adenoviruses deliver the antigen gene, but are altered so that they cannot cause typical adenoviral disease. And of course, you've got to trust that who is ever doing this altering knows what they're doing. Examples of vaccines using these platforms: adenovirus vaccines are used in licensed COVID-19 vaccines, such as CHADOX1, that sounds like the Oxford vaccine, based and AD26 based products, as well as in some Ebola vaccines, where the adenovirus carries the gene for a viral surface protein. Other viral vector platforms include AAV, that's adeno-associated virus, lentivirus, modified Vaccinia ankara, are widely used in gene therapy products and in clinical trial vaccines for HIV, influenza, and cancer. Even though they follow similar manufacturing principles of producing large quantities of modified virus in producer cell lines and then purifying the viral particles. How vector-based vaccine manufacturing works? Manufacturing generally involves creating a master vector seed, infecting or transfecting producer cells, often HEK293 or other mammalian lines. expanding in bioreactors, then harvesting, purifying, and formulating the viral vector suspension as the final vaccine. Downstream steps typically include clarification, filtration, and chromatography to remove host cell lines, cell proteins, and DNA while concentrating the vector, followed by sterile filtration or aseptic processing and extensive quality control testing to ensure identity, potency, and purity. My question is can you and I trust them to what they say? Now, lastly, I want to look at something else. We're looking at Henrietta Lacks. Where is she? She's in my study today. Where is she? Here she is. Ooh, she got a big section of this. Human-derived cells and genetic material. Again, we were talking about MRC5, WI38, other human fetal cell lines. But then we had to ask the question, and it also included bacterial and viral antigens, genetic and structural materials, whole inactivated viruses, some influenza, polio, Salk formulations, live attenuated viruses, example given measles, mumps, rubella, varicella, rotavirus, yellow fever, and some influenza. Now you go to Africa, they want you all to take the yellow fever. That's a live attenuated virus. Purified subunits, including proteins and polysaccharides from bacteria, such as the Bordetella pertussis, Corynebacterium diphtheriae, Chloristium tetani, and Haemophilus influenza type B, Streptococcus pneumoniae, and Neisseria meningitis. And all of those, if you saw the long name for it, it was the second part of the long name told you what it was about. So Bordetella pertussis is the pertussis vaccine. Corynebacterium diphtheria is the diphtheria vaccine. Chloristium tetani is tetanus vaccine. Haemophilus influenza is the influenza vaccine. Streptococcus pneumoniae is for pneumonia. And Neisseria meningitis is for meningitis. Toxoids, chemically detoxified toxins, example given diphtheria and tetanus toxoids. And conjugated polysaccharides, bacterial polysaccharides linked to protein carriers such as diphtheria or tetanus toxoids. Recombinant and genetic platform components. Now, these are all from human and other species. Include recombinant surface antigens, such as hepatitis B surface antigen produced in yeast or mammalian cells. That's mammals, we're mammals, with residual yeast or host cell DNA proteins, meaning the residuals do exist in the vaccines. Viral vectors, adenovirus-based vaccines containing replication deficient viral genomes and human or non-human DNA sequences encoding the antigen. DNA plasmid vaccines in trials and limited licensure containing bacterial plasmid backbone DA and the antigen gene insert. And then mRNA vaccines, COVID-19 platforms containing synthetic mRNA, PEG-related lipids, cholesterol, phospholipids, and buffer components, including residual DNA template or double-stranded RNA impurities may be present in very small amounts depending on purification. Then we have to ask the question, what is a quote-unquote small amount? To move closer to the complete list you're asking for, this is how to approach complete documentation, quote unquote complete. To move closer to the complete list you're asking for, the medical practical method is 1. Cross-reference official excipient tables from the CDC, FDA, EMA, WHO, and independent compilations that tabulate excipients by vaccine name and lot. Point 2, pull ingredient lists, active antigens, excipients, manufacturing residuals from each current package insert for every vaccine on the schedule of interest. Example given U.S. child adult schedule or global World Health Organization pre-qualified list. And 2, overlay with lists compiled in critical literature. Example, Neil Z. Miller's summaries, Neustadter's and Mendelssohn influence ingredient tables, and similar vaccine skeptic resources to make sure disputed or rarely listed residuals. Example given, beta propiolactone. Example given, beta propiolactone and HTAB specific fetal cell lines, quote, are captured. If you want a step, if you want a next step, can be a structured spreadsheet listing vaccine product, manufacturer, platform, meaning live inactivated mRNA, vector, toxoid conjugate, and every declared ingredients plus residuals with separate flags for, quote, animal derived, unquote, human fetal derived, and metal, and ingredient highlighted by critics. Last question we're going to ask were Henrietta Lacks cell lines, HeLa cell lines, used in vaccine research and development? Answer, yes. HeLa cell lines have been used extensively in vaccine research and development, though not as a routine production substrate for currently licensed vaccines. Now, currently licensed, I'm going to presume that means probably within the last 30 to 40 years. That would be 1995 to 1985. But those of us who would have been injected before then could very well be we're all related, because we all carry DNA fragments from our ancestor, Henrietta Lacks. Could that be the reason we've seen an explosion of cancer diagnosis in America since the 1950s? I would venture to say, yes, it is related. Prove me wrong. I see you in the house, Brother Shabaka. He says, greetings, Bob and LIB family. I say yes to vaccination because I get mines from the information you share and provide for us. So I personally say yes to vaccine information. If you know the truth and you suspect this puts your child or yourself at risk, then you then make an educated choice. I cannot and will not make that choice for you. I did make the choice for myself and our daughters. Our first daughter got 1 round of injections at birth, and then we never, ever did it to her again. By the time the second daughter came along, who Maya is celebrating her 35th birthday today. So happy birthday to you, my beloved Maya. 35 years you've been on this planet. What a joy, what a joy. She is an absolute blessing. Maya is following in her father's footsteps. She's an author. She's a, what's the word? Uses herbal therapy. Apocrypha. She's not apocrypha. It's a word for someone who uses herbal therapy. I'll think of it when I stop trying to think of it. But Maya is a clone, if I could say, of me ideologically and what her lifestyle is about. Maya is just so wonderful. She's so beautiful too. She is just gorgeous. But I'm not going to show you her picture. But HeLa cell, we're all related to Henrietta Lacks through HeLa cell lines. Its role in the polio vaccine work. HeLa cells were used by Jonas Salk and collaborators in the 1950s to test and standardize the first inactivated polio vaccine because they are easily infected by poliovirus and can be grown in large quantities. So not just test and standardize, but it was also grown in large quantities. That to me sounds like it was manufactured for distribution across the public. Point two, a large scale, quote, cell factory at Tuskegee University mass produced HeLa cells specifically to supply laboratories evaluating the polio vaccine, shipping hundreds of thousands of HeLa cultures for neutralization and potency testing. And that's at Tuskegee University. Boy, it never stops. Use in later vaccine-related research. HeLa cells have been used as a model system to study many viruses, including measles, mumps, HIV, Zika, and HPV, which feeds into vaccine design, viral pathogenesis work, and antiviral drug development. Discovery of high-risk HPV types in HeLa cells, particularly HPV-18, helped establish the causal link between HPV and cervical cancer, a key step toward developing prophylactic HPV vaccines. But wait a minute. If we're talking about cancer cells from Henrietta Lacks' cervical cancer were used in developing HPV, and now they're talking about high-risk HPV vaccine types, such as HPV-18, I'm going to have to look that up, then we're going to have to ask, what is the connection between HPV-18, its high risk, and Henrietta Lacks? What is the connection? What is the connection between HeLa cell lines and high risk? I'm going to put that in quotes. High risk HPV. Ooh, I didn't want that. And high risk HPV-18. 18 injections. Let's see if we can get something here. 1 second. I just gotta stand up, stretch my back out, and then we're gonna come right back. There is no established vaccine or product called high-risk HPV-18 in the scientific or regulatory literature. Now, it did say, let me go back, discovery of high-risk HPV types. And it says HPV-18. There is no established product called high-risk HPV-18 in the scientific or regulatory literature. Likely intended reference is to high-risk HPV-18 and HPV-18 containing vaccines. Example, HPV vaccines that protect against HPV types 16 and 18. HeLa cells are a cervical cancer-derived human cell line that contains integrated high-risk HPV-18 DNA. Boom. Gotcha. And they are widely used as a research model for HPV-18 positive cervical cancer, but they are not listed as a production cell substrate for licensed HPV vaccines. Next category, HeLa cells and HPV-18. HeLa cells originate from a cervical carcinoma that carries integrated high-risk human papillomavirus type 18, making them a standard in vitro model to study HPV-18 oncogenes, E6 and E7, and related cancer biology. Point. Studies repeatedly document that HPV-18 sequences detected in various lab samples can arise from HeLa contamination, underscoring that HeLa is itself HPV-18 positive cancer tissue, but is not a vaccine ingredient. Whoa. I got to copy all of this and put this in my report. Copy. And there's more. Copy. Cut and paste. Okay, I'm going to continue reading. It says, studies repeatedly document that HPV-18 sequences detected in various lab samples can arise from HeLa contamination, underscoring that HeLa is itself HPV-18 positive cancer tissue, but not a vaccine ingredient. HPV and HPV-18 and HPV vaccines. Licensed HPV vaccines, example given Gardasil and Gardasil 9, target high-risk HPV types 16 and 18, among others, using viral-like particles composed of recombinant L1 capsid proteins to generate neutralizing antibodies intended, but it doesn't necessarily work so well. Clarifying the, quote, connection. The main connection is conceptual and research-oriented. HeLa cells are HPV-18 positive cervical cancer cells used to study mechanisms of high-risk HPV-18 infection, transformation, and therapeutic strategies, including experimental gene editing or drug approaches tested in vitro in the laboratory. And so that takes us to the end of today's classroom. I got a little bit of formatting to do over here to just clarify this. I'm going to be putting up another document on this. Last Thursday, if you were listening to the program last Thursday, we were talking about, and Thursdays are dedicated to learning AI. We learned a program. We added this program to the arsenal that I use for AI, artificial intelligence. Don't do this. Don't do that. Do this. Save. And I'm going to be using this one in the program, which is called Notebook LM. And I'm going to put all of this in there today because Notebook LM to me is absolutely wonderful. And for Africa One, congratulations, Papa Kitty, for the life of Maya. I became mama to my son 48 years ago today. Whoa. January 6th is his birthday too. Whoa. Whoa. Congratulations. Congrats to you, Mama Shingai. Another parallel between us. Ubuntu. I am because we are. That's awesome. Absolutely awesome. That our children would share the same birth anniversary. That's just really awesome. On that note, I'm going to wrap it up. Sip a little of my green tea. Green tea contains something CG, catechin. It's going to help me to live long and love strong. Thanks to everyone who tuned in today. Today was a very powerful conversation and one of the best conversations I've been able to have on this subject. I created a phenomenal report today and it's entitled To Vaccinate or Not. You've got to know. This is information you absolutely must know. So on that note, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. Do spread the word, especially if you can spread the word to young parents, to male and female, because they're vulnerable to the propaganda, the machine, the pharmaceutical machine, constant, unrelenting propaganda. And your doctor most likely has been coerced, not necessarily, because some of the doctors that we choose to be our pediatricians have done their homework and they know I'm not going to be injecting this entire vaccine schedule into this child. Some people claim the tetanus vaccine may be the only good one. I personally said no to my daughters, except for one round in the first daughter, until I had done my research. And then we realized we can't do this to our children. So we're doing the best we can to raise these brilliant, beautiful children. They are going to be stepping into our footprints, taking over the world. We will all be protected by our children and their children, the millennials, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, and now I think they're talking about Generation Zero. I guess that's Generation Z. We're going to do better. Part of the reason we know we're going to do better is because we did our research. We did our homework. We studied these things in our time before engaging in dangerous behaviors that are fairly new to the world. You've been tuned into your favorite. We aim to be your favorite. We are LIV Radio, LIV TV, livinginblack.com. I want to say thank you to Eddie McCrory. He says thank you. Flying Guillotine, Sandra Muhammad. It's great to have you in the house today as well. Please do, if you can, hit the like button and tell more friends. Share our family with your family. Let's all grow together. Let's all pull together. Harambe! 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 Thank you all for being a part of everything we're doing on LIV Radio, LIV TV, and on livinginblack.com. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you.